I think you are on mute, Sam.
All right, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Hello, everyone.
that
Thank
was
you
a
for
fantastic.
joining us. Thank you for joining us today on the second part of the MIA series, where we are discussing some of the hot topics with Azure leaders across the region, some of the recent technologies and updates, and with diverse topics that we're hosting every week. Today's workshop is the second part with Mallik, and we will be discussing the Azure Disk Encryption. And this is the second part. We discussed the Windows VM, and today we're discussing the Linux VM. If you missed the past session, you can find it as long as any of the Reactor sessions on our YouTube video or our YouTube channel. All these videos are put together for you to watch on demand and benefit and continue learning. Before we begin, I would like to quickly introduce myself if you don't know me yet. My name is Hassam. I'm the Reactor Program Manager here in Abu Dhabi. This is a Reactor for the region, not only for the UAE, but also because we've been doing all these great workshops with great speakers from across the region. We're trying to reach out to more and more developers and startups across the region and upskill and share all these knowledge from Microsoft and partners and open source community. So the reactors, as you have seen in this cool video, is a hub where the founders and developers come to meet and connect and work on interesting projects. And I have the pleasure of working on the reactor here. You can connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I share lots of learning resources and material for you to further your knowledge and advance in your career. And on today's workshop, we continue this journey with Mallik. Mallik is a cloud solution architect with years of experience. He's working at Qatar Airways as a cloud solution architect. He has experience in developing, deploying enterprise-scale software applications, and he's specialized in DevOps, containers, and Kubernetes. He's an active speaker at conferences, meetups, and he's leading lots of technical discussions around that. A little bit about the code of conduct before we begin. We're coming from different backgrounds, so in a nutshell, let's be aware of each other. There are lots of differences, so let's be friendly, patient, welcoming, and respectful to all viewpoints and questions. Understanding of these differences as well, and kind and considerate at all time to others. I'll quickly touch on today's topic. So Azure Disk Encryption helps you protect and safeguard the data to meet your organizational security and compliance commitments. And in this second part, we are covering the Azure Disk Encryption with a focus on the Linux VM. We'll be doing lots of code demos and live setup. So, take an advantage of this live session to ask as many questions as you want. We will constantly monitor the chat, and we will have stops to answer these questions. So yeah. And towards the end, by the way, if you prefer to go off mute and ask these questions, you can just mention that to me in the chat, and I will keep that in mind and bring it on towards the end. But during the presentation, we can just have questions in the chat. I think that's all. Mallik, I would love to hand over the mic to you to start the workshop.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Yeah, I'll take out the. I'm taking the control. I'll share my screen.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft Reactor. This is the second session about the Azure Disk Encryption. Last week, the same time, we discussed about Azure Disk Encryption on Windows. And today's session is about the same on Linux. How do you perform, on the Linux flavor of Ubuntu or Red Hat Enterprise Linux virtual machines? this is the agenda. I'll try to recap what we discussed in the last session. We discussed, this is the agenda we discussed in the last session. I will quickly recap what we discussed in the last session in case somebody has missed it. I'll give a short recap. In case if you want to visit the Microsoft Reactor and you want to see the last session, this is the video where you can find out the Azure Disk Encryption for Windows VM. It is already there in the videos. You can find here. Okay. So I will try to recap. Let's go to one by one. Last week what discussed. Before to that, thank you Husam for the introduction. Myself Mallikarjuna. I mean, you can call me Mallik. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter. This is my GitHub account. The public projects which I create for. In the last session, people asked me about the code. You can go there and you can find the code there. And then this is my channel in case if any of the events which I'm hosting, which I have the recording for that event, I'll be uploading in my YouTube channel. I'm not a good YouTuber. I'm the community speaker. When do I come run the events, I get those event recording and place in the YouTube so that in case if somebody is unable to attend, we know in this real-time world, taking your time and attending the events will be challenging. So in case if somebody is missing, I mean, you can go and check on my YouTube channel, the event recordings. Yeah, this is my the channel meetup group which I conduct events on, and this is my GitHub account. Let me show you that for the last week. This is the GitHub account, and here the Terraform Azure RM Disk Encrypt. This is the public project which repository which I created. You can find here. Even I have put the presentation slides here. You can go and download. And the channel I talk about, this is my channel. You can find me on Azure Reddy. This is my YouTube channel name, where you can find my videos, fast videos, which I uploaded here. As I said, I'm not a YouTuber, quite recently I'll not be posting anything unless until there is an event, and that I will be posting that event recording. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the slides. This is all about me. So to take the quickly recap, we will try to understand what is Azure encryption. Azure encryption provides various options to secure the data. Generally the data will be at rest or in a transit. There are various services, Azure services offerings, which provides this encryption feature, which you can enable. Here I have listed few on the left hand side, like the Azure VPN encryption, client-side encryption for Azure blobs, or storage server-side service encryption, and the Azure disk encryption, which eventually we'll be talking about. And how we can perform them. This encryption feature, how we can enable them on those services using the server-side encryption or a client-side encryption or an encryption at host. This is what we talked about in the last session. Okay, so last week we have seen the double encryption. Double encryption is nothing but by default, Azure does this encryption with the platform managed keys. In case if you want to apply the double encryption, you can apply the Azure Disk Encryption with the customer managed keys, which the keys which you will be creating in the Azure Key Vault. Using that, we will be achieving the double encryption. That's what we have seen in the last session. Today also we'll try to see by enabling the Azure Disk Encryption on the Linux virtual machines. As we see, we talked about, what is the the process behind the Azure encryption at rest. What Azure uses the symmetric encryption to encrypt and decrypt the large amounts of data quickly. These keys are stored in memory. You don't see any performance issues when you're doing the when you're retrieving your data or you're writing the data to the storage backend. So encryption at rest uses the symmetric encryption. All the we talked about the purposes. We're trying to avoid the attacks or attempts to obtain our data. This is the purpose of encryption at rest, and also to have any governance policies or security policies which the organizations may be interested in to be compliant to the HIPAA or a PCI or a FedRAMP. To meet such requirements, also we need to perform the disk encryption. Yeah, these are the few purposes which may fit for you. And most of the, if you see the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS offerings of the cloud services in Microsoft, all of them, as I said, the encryption feature is available for most of the services. When you want to enable double encryption, then using the customer managed keys, we can do that. These are the service offerings for encryption at rest. We talked about Azure Disk Encryption, what it can do. Azure Disk Encryption, anyone who is having an Azure infrastructure, they can apply this Azure Disk Encryption on a Windows machines or Linux virtual machines, and also the virtual machine scale set. Again, virtual machine scale sets are comprised of Linux or Windows scale set. For example, the AKS. If you talk about AKS cluster, AKS cluster based on the VM scale set node pool, which may come. The Ubuntu pool or Windows pool. So those are the VM virtual machine scale set. In case if you're planning to deploy the virtual machine scale set, plan to deploy virtual machine scale set and trying to achieve the encryption on Linux virtual machines. Currently, OS encryption is not supported on virtual machine scale set for Linux flavor. You can do only the data disks for virtual machine scale sets. As we discussed about Windows VMs, what are supported, what is not supported, and what kind of operating systems we have. And this is the disk encryption requirement. When should I do the Azure Disk Encryption? These are the Q&A. It will answer you. I mean, whether you want to really perform disk encryption or not. These questions will tell you to apply this encryption. If you don't want already most of the services are encrypted by Azure managed keys, and it is not a requirement to do a double encryption or perform an encryption with your customer managed keys, then no action is required. Yeah. Comparison. Yeah, we talked about what as I said, there are many ways where we can do the encryption at rest. When you talk about encryption at rest with the platform managed keys provided by Azure, so we can encrypt the what we can encrypt here. If you see the comparison table, we can encrypt the OS disk and data disks, but not the temporary disk, not the encryption of the caches, and the data flows between the Azure compute and Azure storage. These flows will not be encrypted. Yeah. So these are the comparisons. If you're using Azure Disk Encryption, you could see everything here. The only difference between encryption at host is that the security center still may show you that alert saying unhealthy, because the security center will not be able to detect even when you enable the encryption at host. Yeah, so that is only the difference. When you do the Azure Disk Encryption or encryption at host, you get all the features, except you will see the Azure security center alerts. Now you may have to suppress them. In case if you are doing encryption at host, you can suppress those alerts for that particular virtual machines. Yes, even today this applies for this today's session also. What is required to perform an Azure Disk Encryption and how we can perform. To perform Azure encryption, we need a key vault, and then we have to create a key encryption key. When you create a key vault, there is an option called Azure Disk Encryption, which need to be permitted on the key vault. To get the keys, unwrap the keys. And then inside the key vault, we need to create the encryption key. I mean, based on your it is, I think 20480 is available, and then I think 2 more algorithms are available currently. I mean, you can create them. You can use them to create your keys. And using the extension, we will be performing the disk encryption. Yeah. And then how to perform? There are ways for the user experience. As a user, how do you do that? I mean, whichever the comfortable way you can do. If you are perfect with the your hands-on with the Azure CLI commands, you can do that. Or if you are okay with the PowerShell commandlets, you can do that. Or if you want to do the infrastructure as a code, when you're trying to create a virtual machine, then you want to do the disk encryption and release the server. In a single set. So with the automation, infrastructure as a code, you can use the Azure DevOps. and then PowerShell task in that, or a Terraform task, even Azure CLI task. These are the inside the Azure DevOps. You can find these extensions to perform your job. Yeah? These are the ways which we can perform the Azure Disk Encryption. Azure Virtual Machine extensions. So these extensions are nothing but a small, it is like a job. You want to do a job, then it is mostly useful for the post provisioning of the virtual machines. If you want to run a custom script, or you want to run the disk encryption, or you want to have even you want to reset the password. In case if you forgot your virtual machine user ID password, when you try to go to the VM Blade, and you will find a reset option there. When you try to reset with the user ID password, then there is an extension will be installed, and then the password will be reset. So that's how it happens. So these are the extensions which are helpful to perform the post deployment of the virtual machines. There are various. I have presented here only few. This is the one today we are going to use. Is it Lvm Disk Encryption extension? Yeah. So I'm familiar with the PowerShell, so I have presented here today the PowerShell. I think most of the time, so you will get the things done with the PowerShell code when it comes to performing the administration tasks, post VM provisioning. So this is the PowerShell, simple PowerShell code, which is available in Azure document docs.microsoft.com. Even I have kept there today. Let me, since we are here, if we go to the Windows VM, I have created this disk encryption. This is the GitHub account which I shown. In that repository, you will find a disk encryption PowerShell script, which I kept it here. We can go and check that. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. Yeah, this is what I was talking about Azure Security Center. You will get these security alerts when when the VM is not encrypted at rest. When you're doing encryption at host, even though Security Center will show you the alerts, you need to suppress those VMs. So you have to accept that. Okay, this is what the recap so far we have done. Let's move on to the Azure Disk Encryption for Linux virtual machines. This is the event code for today, 14127. In case if you are looking for event ID, this is the event code for today's event. Yeah, the Azure Disk Encryption. Azure Disk Encryption for Linux or ADE, for Linux virtual machines. It uses the DM crypt feature for performing the disk encryption. It is the transparent disk encryption subsystem of Linux. The DM is nothing but DM crypt is nothing but a device mapper cryptographic routines which is there in the sublevel subsystem of Linux. Using that feature, the Azure virtual machines will be encrypted, the data disks and the OS disks. And also, in case if you're adding any file shares onto your Linux virtual machines, those things you will not be able to encrypt them. Also, in case if you're having a ephemeral OS disk while creating your virtual machine, if you are selecting the ephemeral OS disk will not be able to encrypt them. There are a few things we need to consider. We'll see that now. The Azure Virtual Machine Azure Disk Encryption for Linux virtual machines uses the DM crypt feature, to perform the disk encryption. Let's see the supported operating systems. So far good, right? Audio is clear, right? I'm just checking.
Audio is perfect, thanks. Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, let's go back to the slide. Okay. So we talked about this using the DM crypt feature. We're going to perform the ADE. Let's see the supported operating systems. Currently the Azure Disk Encryption is supported for the Linux Gallery, Microsoft Gallery for Linux. If you go here to the portal. This is the marketplace gallery where we find all sorts of images. For example, for today, So I don't want to select. If you see, go to the marketplace, you can see these are the the OS flavors available. Let's say I'm selecting Red Hat. So in that again, let's go here. So these are the flavors which are available for the you can select your version while creating your virtual machine. This is what the marketplace images are supported for Azure Disk Encryption. Okay, in case if you have any custom Linux images, you cannot apply the disk encryption there. You cannot apply the Azure Disk Encryption for the Linux images. And also, if you have your own, the RHL golden images, Red Hat Enterprise subscription, in case you have, you can bring your own subscription golden images. On that, the Azure Disk Encryption is supported. These are the supported operating systems. And then when it comes to the Linux versus Windows, Linux has a kind of a requirement for the memory when you want to perform the Azure Disk Encryption. In case if you are trying to perform a disk encryption only on data disk of your Linux machine, then 2 GB memory is sufficient. Okay, and you don't have a plan to perform on a OS disk, then 2 GB memory virtual machine sizes will suffice for your Azure Disk Encryption. In case you are planning to perform the OS disk encryption plus data disk encryption, then the minimum requirement of the VM SKU is 8 GB. For example, if you take DTS V3 will come with 8 GB of memory. So this is the recommended memory to encrypt the OS disk and data disks. Yeah. So this is the document I just put for you. The link, the wonderful documentation is available there. So many, the what you call detailed discussion is done here on this Linux disk encryption. You can go and find out there. I put key points here. I mean, for this today's, we cannot put everything. It takes more, I think, longer than it may take days when we discuss about Azure Disk Encryption for Linux. There are many things which we need to consider, but I have put key points here. Yeah. So this is different from Windows. Why? As I said, that this encryption takes more than 3 to, depends upon the minimum it takes based upon, let's say your OS disk is 64 GB and then you have data disks of 4 GB or 8 GB or 16 less. It will take, it depends upon the encryption time depends upon the size of your disk and then the SKU. We can have the managed disk SKU as a standard LRS or a premium. Based on the SKU also, the complete encryption status. It is not that easy. I mean, like Windows encryption, you will find it completed in 5 to 10 minutes. No, this Azure Disk Encryption for Linux, it may take hours. You should be, and also what you call, there should not be any kind of a login or any kind of process other than daemon process. If there are any daemon process, Azure Disk Encryption will kill them. Okay. In case if there are no daemon process and you have run some manual user, you logged into a system or you, let's say, file true and then slip simple command which is continuously running. It is not a daemon process in the Linux. So such things should not be running, before we start the Linux encryption. Means there should not be any open files on the Linux. Yeah. So in case if some of the open files are there and you start doing Azure encryption, you may end up in failure. And I've seen most of the cases with my experience. You will see failures only. If you don't follow the strict and recommended practices when you're doing the Azure Disk Encryption for Linux, you will see that. And also in case how this disk encryption is happening, what is happening, we all have that curiosity when you start any job as an infrastructure admin or when you want to perform, when you did the job and you want to know what is the status of it. Yeah. So it is recommended to have the Vmware Diagnostics enabled for the virtual machine, so that you can go to the serial console and you can see what is really happening there. Yeah. So these are the recommendations from Azure when you're trying to do the Azure encryption. Since in case if you end up in problems, it would be easy, for you to start troubleshooting it and seeing it instead of opening a Microsoft ticket. When we follow these recommendations, we will get the answer then and there. Yeah. And then coming to the little constraint on the OS disk, the resizing of the OS disk is not possible. When you perform an OS disk encryption for any Linux flavor virtual machine, you cannot resize the OS disk. It is not supported. And also, yes, okay, resize is not available, then I can disable the encryption. No, it is not possible. So that's where you have to be more cautious. Either the resizing of the OS disk or disabling encryption is not supported. But yes, disabling encryption is allowed for the data volumes on the Linux virtual machine. Yeah, so you need to plan carefully when you're planning a virtual machine and you're planning for Azure Disk Encryption of that Linux virtual machine. Okay. Presented the Microsoft Docs there. I think they have a detailed discussion on this Azure Disk Encryption for Linux machines also. Let me show you that. Let's go back to we talked about recommendations. When you go to the virtual machine, this is the virtual machine I have. Let me start this. Yeah, as I said, it will take some time. So what do I do in meantime before we get to the demo? I know it is not like we discuss and then we start the demo. We need to start early now so that the disk encryption starts its job. So what I will do, I have a pipeline which is created in Azure DevOps, and this is the source code, people, which is there. This is the RHL VM. So here today we are going to do the change here, and then you see the pipeline will be triggered here in the Azure DevOps. The single source of truth is in GitHub. The pipeline and the source code resides in the GitHub, but only we are using the Azure DevOps agent, and we are going to perform our job to create the virtual machine. Okay. I'll show that in the what is the pipeline. I'll give a detailed discussion about what is the pipeline and all. If you just me quickly run through this, if you go to this project Terraform Azure Disk Encrypt, you'll see the pipeline, and then you go to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. This is the YAML pipeline, which is going to run now using this pipeline. As I'm not touching anything here. This is the pipeline which will be used to run the pipeline. Okay. What we need to do now, we need to edit the code to get the pipeline triggered. Okay, let's. I'm doing directly. I don't have any other IDEs. So VM MSFT React. Okay. RHL Microsoft React. This is a VM which I'm going to create. Putting the changes. You see, if you go to the, I just made a comment, new VM, RHL MSFT Microsoft React, REACT, and the pipeline has been triggered. This is the build plan and build pipeline, which I have a YAML pipeline, which I've shown there, which is this YAML pipeline is already available for you in the GitHub. You can go and download that. Okay, let this run. And meanwhile, I'll show you the boot diagnostics. If you go to the boot diagnostics on the VM blade, you can select your Azure storage account to see the screenshot. This is how it is helpful in case if there are any problems during the VM startup. It will show you in the boot log. Yeah, this is where it will show you like this. So also, if you want to have a serial console, what is really happening on the the VM console, you need to have the boot diagnostics enabled. That is the recommendation. Let's see what is happening. We just started the virtual machine here. Just now it is started. Okay. If you see here, it is checking. This is the agent extension, which is for this demo already ran it previously. One virtual machine with the encryption already enabled. So what happens when you restart the virtual machine? It is going to do it will check everything. And if you see it will show you in the serial console. This is the the part 64 GB OS disk. is encrypted already. You can see the crypt here. OS encrypt. OS disk is already encrypted, and also the data. I have one data disk for this virtual machine that is also encrypted. The data disk on which I created. So this is how the boot diagnostics putting on the storage account will help you to see the without logging into the virtual machine. Okay. Here also you can log in. If you give the password, you can do the login here. So this is what it is. So let's see the VM plan. So what we are going to do? So we are going to create the virtual machine. Yeah. Using this Terraform job, and then let me approve this so that it deploys in the backend. Okay, let's move on to the okay, it is starting. So it takes time. So we are creating a virtual machine and trying to do a disk encryption during this, and we see the status. Yeah. Okay. So here we are discussing about the pros and cons, about the Azure Disk Encryption for Linux. Okay. So as I said, I mean, in case you have already a virtual machine and you have workload running on it, and you are trying to perform it is not a new VM basically. You have already a data there, and you want to perform the disk encryption on the existing virtual machine. It is recommended to have a backup enabled before you perform the Azure Disk Encryption, or you take a snapshot of the virtual machine. Taking a snapshot of the virtual machine requires a downtime, right? So you need to shut down the VM and you need to take a snapshot, or you have to have Azure backup enabled for your Azure virtual machine before doing the encryption. In case if something goes wrong, quickly we can recover. Since it is a running virtual machine which is already serving some traffic, or for any application which is already running there, you would not be able to have a downtime on that. So it is always recommended to have a backup enabled on the virtual machine which you are going to perform, or a snapshot is taken, for the Linux virtual machine. And once you do the encryption, right? Once you perform the encryption, you will find the BEK volume inside the virtual machine or Linux virtual machine. If you go and display the disk DF5H, or you'll find this /MNT Azure BEK disk. Okay. This is the where the Azure virtual machine, Azure Disk Encryption keys will be stored. Right. You should not touch anything here. The contents in this disk. So touching these contents inside this disk may corrupt the entire virtual OS disk or data disk, which in turn the virtual machine will not be available, right, for you. So you have to keep in mind that you should not be doing any kind of storing a data or doing anything on this particular the volume, BEK volume. Okay. To show you that BEK volume, let me. See, this is the volume. Yeah, you should not touch it, and you should not put any kind of data, or you should not handle this. You should leave it as it is. Okay. Yeah, this is where the key vault keys will be stored. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we have this, as you are aware, when it comes to the OS disk, you want to perform the data disk encryption first, and then you want to perform the OS disk later. Yes, you can do that. It is possible. So the data disk, we have the Lvm, logical volume creation we have on the Linux service. We can do that. So what we can do, when you have a disk attached to the virtual machine, it will be seen as a SDC or SDD, SD based on the alphabetical order in the virtual machine. It will be shown. If you see here now, this is SDCC and then SDD now. In case if I add another virtual, another data disk to the virtual machine, it is going to be the SD ABCDFE. Okay, the E will come. So, for example, what we are talking about here is the logical volume grouping. Basically, when you what do you call We have two ways here: traditional LVM encryption and then LVM on crypt. Okay. For some reason, it is recommended to use. It's better to go with the traditional instead of traditional LVM. Go with the LVM on crypt. LVM crypt using NVM crypt. When you want to use the LVM on crypt feature for encrypting your disks, we need to select an option called encrypt format all. When you're doing the encryption, right? We are running an extension command to encrypt the what do you call? Let me recall the command. Okay, let's go here. Windows VM and then disk encryption PowerShell. So here, this is the line number 15, which is the extension which we are running. Here we are not selecting any kind of option called encrypt format all. Okay, so that is where when you want to use LVM on crypt, okay, this is one of the method when you want to have the PVs created, VGs created, and you can extend your the volumes for the workloads. So you can use this LVM on crypt when you're planning for the Lvm structure based file systems. Okay, so using this encrypt format all feature, we can do that. But the caution is that when you encrypt format all, in case if there is any data on your data disk, it will be erased. It will be formatted. So in case you have, let's say, your 3-4 disk and one disk you have a data which is there, and you want to ignore that, you need to unmount the data disk before performing the disk encryption using the encrypt format all feature. Okay, or else the data will be formatted. Data will be lost. This is the caution when you are using this feature. Okay, so when you talk about LVM structure, first what we are going to do, we're going to create the volume, physical volumes, right? Once we create a physical volumes, and then on top of it we'll create the what you call volume groups, and then volume groups. Then after that, then we create the volumes on it. Okay, yeah, here I missed the point. First we have to add the data disk, and then we will be encrypting that layer, that data disk, and on top of it, we'll be creating the physical volumes or logical volumes on it. This is one of it, the recommended approach when you want to do the disk encryption for Linux data disks. I found this way of doing the disk encryption is more helpful, and to support the volume groups. We can create multiple volume groups, and then you can extend it. In case if you have created the additional data disk and you want to extend your volume group, you can do that. For application, you're not going to change the mount volume. It will be the same, but the mount volume will be coming from the volume group, where you can extend always in case of the file system is getting full. Yeah, in the real-time scenarios. This is the documentation. They have given a very step-by-step procedure in how to do the how to use the LVM on crypt, for the virtual machines, Linux virtual machines. Yeah, that's it. Let's move on to the demo as we were already there. Okay, let's go to this virtual machine and see the pipeline, what is doing. Okay, let's see the pipeline, what is doing. Okay, this is virtual machine is created. As I said, you have to have the zero process running before the Azure Disk Encryption is being enabled on the virtual machine. There should not be any open files on the Linux server. Yeah. So I think this virtual machine extension is running there. The ADA. Let me go back. I'll run through this. Okay. The code where today, what I'm running today. So if you go to this, this is my the GitHub account. Here is my mail ID in case if you want to have any queries, you have any troubles in using the code, you can write an email to me. This is the project. There is a repository Terraform Azure Disk Encrypt. Here I have kept for Windows, Ubuntu, and RHLVM. This Terraform code is very simple. I have not created any modules. keeping in mind, from the beginners to intermediate, I just don't want to mess up, in case if you are expert in the Terraform, definitely you'll be able to write the modules based on this, the basic Terraform code. Yeah. I targeted only the, the beginners and intermediate users of Terraform, where they are interested in performing the infrastructure as a code to deploy the virtual machines. Okay. So here are the files for the virtual machine. Here where the assumptions of these, we need to have the RG name of the particular VM, and then you need to have a subnet and a VNet, so that the virtual machine goes and deploys there. And from line 12 to 13, 12 to 15, you can provide your, the VM SKU, and then the disk SKU, and then disk size of the data disks. This is what today we are creating. I think the VM is already created. Let's filter it out. MSFT. Okay. See, this is the VM which we are creating now. It has one data disk. Okay. If you go to the virtual machine and then the encryption extensions. So now, I'll talk about the custom script. See, now this Linux disk encryption is transitioning. Okay. Let's go to the custom script. What I'm doing, as I said, the one other key point, right? When you want to perform the disk encryption on data disks, okay, the data disk should be mounted inside the Windows virtual machine or the Linux virtual machine. So using the custom script, post VM provisioning, I'm doing a partitioning, either on the Windows or on a Linux. I'm using the script which is there in the GitHub account of Azure. I just kept it here for your purpose. This is the script which will be running post VM creation. So this script, you can keep it in your storage account, and then you can call it, which if you go to that RHL VM, if you go to the VM code, yeah, this is where my storage account where I kept this code. I'm calling it, so that we are formatting the data disk so that we can achieve the Azure Disk Encryption post the VM creation. Yeah. Okay. So this is the code. Yeah. Now, what else I need to show here? I think presentation is here, the slides are here, and then this is the pipelines where this YAML pipeline is available. And also the last week's sessions we discussed about on a Windows virtual machine, that PowerShell is here, and this is the code to perform the disk encryption for Windows virtual machines. Okay. And then the pipelines for using PowerShell I have kept here. Okay. You can find the using PowerShell JSON. You can just import it, and you can download this and you can import into your Azure DevOps. Yeah, in case if you are interested in performing this, or in case you just want to perform using the Azure Cloud PowerShell, even you have this disk encryption PowerShell script. You need to provide some inputs, and then you can start doing the encryption using the PowerShell. Okay, today for this demo, I have this is the virtual machine. If you see the virtual machine, hold on, sorry. If you see the virtual machine code, I have selected the image reference is Red Hat 7.9. Yeah, this is the Red Hat 7.9 which we are creating. I think this is completed now. Okay, if you see the sequence of activities, virtual machine is created and it's completed. Then I'm doing the custom script, to format the data disks. Okay, whatever the data disk which I added in for the virtual machine. Once the formatting is there, I'm just taking a cool down period for some time, so that there are no any open files on the virtual Linux virtual machine, so that our Linux disk encryption goes successful. Yeah, and then this extension is started, to form the Azure Disk Encryption for Linux. Okay, this job is done. And if you go here, let's go to the virtual machine and try to refresh it. If you go to extensions, and you may see the the extension is saying provision succeeded. No. So what you see, if you see here, now if you're watching this in seeing the status message, it says that I'm encrypting the data volume first, This still is not OS, it didn't start yet. It is just doing the data volume encryption, and which is of 27%. And it is showing I'm having a data volumes of 1 of 1. In case if you have more data volumes, I mean data disk, it will definitely show here like 1 of 4, 1 of, okay, I have screenshots which I've taken. As I said, Azure Disk Encryption Linux takes time. So I have done, for this demo, I've done something and I captured some status pictures. I will show you that. I don't know, I kept downloads, okay. Okay, so if you're seeing here, this is the, I've done one of the VM, which is still there. So if you see the encryption status using the extension and using the partial commandlet, it will show you something like this, the OS volume encryption status and data volume encryption status, and it is saying the progress message. You need to look for the progress message. So here also I have a data volume, which is almost 95% is getting completed. And then, yeah, this is, I think, the same which you are currently seeing now. So it will show you like that. Even it says that status is provision succeeded. But when you go to the status message or a view detailed status, then only you will come to know whether the disk encryption is completely successful. Unless until then, you should not log into the virtual machine. Yeah, as we said, there should not be any open files on the Linux machine to have the disk encryption successfully completed. So you should not log into the Linux virtual machine to see how it is really performing. This is the only way how you can verify the Linux disk encryption is completed. Coming here and watching the extension. Yeah. If you see the detailed message of the extension, and you could see the line number 6. It is showing. It is saying the contradictory of the line 5. It is saying the 6th line. OS disk, it is saying encryption is in progress and data is also in progress. So as I said, it may take 1 to 3 hours since I have selected a very a small VM SKU, and then the disk is 16 GB only. Okay. In case you are deploying SAP images, okay, like a terabytes of data disk you have, it may take days. Okay, you have to be patient when you're performing a Linux disk encryption. Yeah, when you're performing OS disk and data disk, it may take 3 days too. Yeah, I have seen when I deployed the SAP image, it almost took 2 days plus. Yeah, to perform the complete disk encryption. It depends upon the, as I said, it depends upon the data size of your OS disk. This is only 64 GB and this is the 16 GB of size which I have selected. Small VM SKU and the premium I have taken. In case if you're selecting the standard SKU, then again it differs. The encryption, the performance differs. The max IPOs and the throughput of the disk, right? It all depends upon the VM SKU what we are taking. Okay, so yeah, I think when we come here, now we are seeing the data disk which is performing SAC with platform managed keys and Azure Disk Encryption keys, which is really happening. Let's go back to the different VM and see the status, how the completed VM I'm talking about. Okay, I think the using the same pipeline. If I go to the Azure DevOps, this is the pipeline, YAML pipeline. Previously in the afternoon, before to this, I just created this virtual machine. The VM React, which I created 2 hours before, 3 hours before, I guess. Okay, let's start this. And also you need to make sure the before handovering to your the application usage, you need to ensure the doing a couple of times a restart of your Linux virtual machine, so that the Azure Disk Encryption is working. Yeah, sometimes if the encryption is not proper, the virtual machine will not come up. Yeah, it means it is corrupted. You need to ensure by restarting couple of times. Yeah. Restart in the sense doing a the hard reboot, stopping it for waiting for some time and then you starting it, so that it will tell you if there are real problems. If you go to the serial console, virtual machine is coming up. So far good, right? Video and everything is okay, right? I'm just checking.
Yeah, all is well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
started a bit late, so no problem. I mean, let's
Yeah, we
make
are
sure.
reaching. Yeah. Yeah, I will take another 5 to 10 minutes max. Yeah.
No worries.
And we'll
No worries.
conclude.
All good.
And we will take questions also in another 5 minutes. Okay, is there any questions so far? Okay, okay, we'll talk about the questions in another 5 minutes, please. Please post your questions. Yeah, we are at Q&A. Okay, this is the VM which I already encrypted here. Okay, and it is coming up. It is a search session daemon is started, and now it is checking for any cloud init running there, and it's running some final modules, and now it is checking for the Azure Disk Encryption. Yeah, it is verifying. You know, as I said, the BEK volume, using the BEK volume, you know, it recalls the keys and it will see the encryption status of the data disks. Yeah, I think it's successfully completed. Let's log into that. Okay, still going. Okay, let's log in through the putty. So okay, anyway, so that is one, and today is what we created in SFT React. This we just deployed now and see what is the current status of it. So now you see a different message now, right? You see the status message: encryption succeeded for data volumes only. Yeah, not yet on the data OS disks. Okay, still it is doing that. Yeah, it will take some time. As I said, the depends upon the, it takes hours. It's not that quickly it happens. Okay. What I was doing, let's go back to the other VM. Now let me show you. Okay, this VM. Let's log into this. Okay, let's start it up. Sorry, for demo purpose, for safe side, I created multiple VMs so that in case one doesn't comes up, I think I'll take another VM. Okay, this is running. Let's take this VM. Okay. Start session. Oh, sorry. Give a minute. Okay. Change settings. Let's see the window font. I'll change the font a little much higher. Okay. Here we go. This is where you see the volumes. Whenever you add any data disk to that, you'll find the data disk here. Let's quickly add one and then, okay, anyways, that'll take some time. I'll try to add one for this. Four GB is fine. Let's save it. Meanwhile, it will be updating in the backend. So if you see the data disk, and then you should see the crypt volume here. Yeah. So it means the disk has been encrypted. And then if you want a detailed message, yeah, you'll see the signature of it, of all these. Yes, this is the data disk and this is the BEK disk. Yeah, so this is it. Okay, new disk added and then updated in the backend. If you say lsblk, see the E created. We just created a 4 GB disk. This is how you will see the newly attached data disk to the virtual machine, and you can perform the data disk encryption post that. In case if you are using the LVM, if you are planning to use the LVM, the creating LVM structure, you can have these disks combined and then as a create the physical volume, and then you can create a logical volume group, and then you can have a volumes created and based on that volume groups. Okay, that's it for today. Yeah, so going to the pipeline. Let me just this pipeline is there in the GitHub account. Yeah. One stage we are trying to look up the plan, and then the second stage we are trying to do the deployment using the Azure DevOps YAML pipeline. At the same time, I already also have the what you call release pipeline too. In case if who is not familiar with the YAML pipelines, this is the pipeline which I already have it using the GitHub as a source. If you go to here, this is my GitHub, added as an artifact of a GitHub, and then running the code there. Yeah, you can add the the Azure provides ways to have your Azure DevOps provides a various number of service connections. For my GitHub account, I have created the service connection for GitHub to authorize for the pipelines. So that is what I am using here in the pipeline to. If you go to the code, this is where it is. In case if you, let's say, where it is coming from, really the this is coming from the GitHub. This is my account GitHub, where you will see all the things. Once you authorize with the service connection of the GitHub account, you'll find all the folders there inside it. But then you can select one of the VM. So the same pipeline already kept there for you. Either who is familiar with the release pipelines, release pipeline is also available in the GitHub account. If you go to the disk encrypt and pipelines, it is available here in the Reddy Linux virtual machine. This is using the JSON form. I have exported it in a JSON form. When you export it, it will be as a JSON. You download it and you can import that. In case if you're familiar with the YAML, this is the YAML. Both the ways I have given. In case if anyone has any questions, I will take it now. Meanwhile, let's see the for today's demo virtual machine, what is really happening there. This is the virtual machine we just created during our demo. Now you see the status message, and now it has started the OS disk encryption. Yeah, it will take time. Yeah, eventually when you should see the what you call. Let me show you in the completed virtual machine the status of the extension. Which is already completed. If I go to the extension, you see the status message saying that encryption succeeded for all volumes. And then if you want to go more detail, you have to click on the view detail message. Unless until you see line 5 and 6, you should not log into the Linux virtual machine. Yeah, the OS and data disk should be encrypted. The status should be encrypted. Yeah, and as I said, in case if you're trying to perform Azure Disk Encryption on the current workload, the existing VMs, please ensure that you're taking a backup before you starting the Azure Disk Encryption. Okay. Okay, then let's talk about the Q&A. Okay. Okay, today the Linux disk encryption looks scary. No questions came up. Anyways, James has has a question. Hi, James. Yeah, sometimes there's a reason it is scary. I mean, you cannot when you're performing an Azure Disk Encryption. In case if something happens, you cannot recover the VM. You need to delete the VM, and you have to create the virtual machine. So that is the reason Microsoft highly recommends to take the backup before performing the virtual encryption, disk encryption for Linux machines. Yeah, even yes, server of 12 TB disk. So yeah, see, when we are having 120 TB of TB, there is a calculation. Azure does a calculation of memory versus disk size. So when you are having a 120 TB of data, 12 TB of data disk, then at least it should have a 128 GB of RAM, to perform the disk encryption. So initially, what you can do when you're performing a disk encryption, this is what I experienced. I have increased the SKU size. Let's say my data disks are more than TBs. Okay, I've selected a SKU with a bigger number. I have performed the disk encryption. Then I have reduced it. Once the disk encryption is completed, you can reduce the SKU. That is how you can save time and you can have the success rate when you're performing the Linux virtual machine disk encryption. So there is a the calculation. When you're having a 12 TB of data disk, then we need to have the good number of memory available to perform the OS disk or data disk encryption. Otherwise, you will end up in waiting days. Yeah, that is one thing. Yeah, always, the new features always comes at a cost. I understand that. Yeah, there are the consequences when we don't take care of few recommended best practices when we are performing the Azure Disk Encryption especially for the Linux virtual machines. Yeah, I agree with. I can't agree more with you, James. Thank you for that. Okay. Okay, Balaji has a question. I'm a student. How can I enter into this field? I mean to say the Azure cloud. I assume. Yes. To start with, for the student, there is a beautiful course which covers most of the Azure services, which is the AZ900. You can take the course. You can take the exam to verify yourself. I mean to know your up to the. You can take the exam to verify you are up to that. Or you can just go to the learn.microsoft.com and you can there's a course available online. You can go and learn there. There are the free labs are also available when you're performing the when you do the online learning. Microsoft provides free subscription and to perform the labs. You don't need to have any kind of credits to perform those labs. It is available on learn.microsoft.com. You can do that. That is, I think that is, I suggest that is the good start as a student to know about Azure cloud service offerings. AZ900 is the best course. Okay, in which scenario disk encryption fails? Yes, Santosh. Sometimes the memory is not sufficient. You have a larger disk, and then it may fail. It may take time, or it may not be able to succeed. Even though there are no any open files on the Linux virtual machine, still there is a chance, to fail. And in case if you're not using the disks, the formats, we have the various variants of disk formats, right? Other than the required supported formats, if you're trying to do encryption, yes, there we may have the failure scenario. Yeah. Okay. So somebody's typing a question.
Again, if any of the members would like to go off mute and ask any questions, please mention that to me in the chat. I'm sharing also some related modules on Learn for you to continue the journey. And also you can access more resources as well by checking into the page we have shared earlier on the chat. You will also have access to the survey to provide us some feedback on today's session and also about also what topics you would love to see. Don't miss on the next sessions that are happening in the MIA series. I also shared the series page there on the chat where you can find all the upcoming sessions and join them live.
Yes, even you can write to me on an email in case if you have anything, and you can provide us a feedback in case if you are looking for any session, which helps. And definitely, we are okay to provide in case any session which you are looking for in any of the Azure cloud services. I think something is coming up. I think someone is trying to type, or that's it. Some today questions. I think.
All right, I'm not sure if there is a long question coming through or
up, yeah. So
someone forgot it. All right. Meanwhile, let me quickly wrap up. Remind everyone that this session is recorded and it will be available on the YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed and make sure you are also part of the community. On Meetup, I share the Reactor Meetup and also the Azure Qatar Meetup, where Mallik is a leader there. Follow us on Twitter, sign up to the email newsletter where we share a monthly newsletter that has all the interesting upcoming events across all the reactors. I think that's it. I'm seeing the typing again. I prefer if you go off mute. So we know.
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, happy to hear your voice and answer your question in case you have anything. Don't hesitate. Everybody has the best to their knowledge. I mean, not everything we are perfect there. We are trying to every day. We are a daily student. We are learning something new. Yeah, that is my motto.
And I love the fact that one of the students mentioned that in the chat is that they're early on this. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see that someone from early on in their career joining such a topic on today. I mean, I would relatively consider this being intermediate or advanced. So it's cool to see such interest in the topic from early on from students.
Yeah, there's a question from Balaji. Yeah, yes, Balaji. This is we're trying to perform this also falls under the the SAIM, the security, Azure security, right? Azure security standard has a recommendation to have the data trust and data transit should be secured. So this is one of the way using the Azure Disk Encryption we are trying to meet the security requirement. When it comes to cloud, we need to ensure the data is protected.
All right, I think that concludes our session today. Thank you, Mallik, for joining us and sharing your experience with our community. And we look forward to having you in the future. For everyone who is also joining us today on the live and still did not register for next week's session on the MIA series, please do. Don't miss any of the upcoming sessions, and also make sure that you are constantly checking the Reactor Meetup to find all the learning opportunities there. Feel free to connect with Mallik and connect with myself on the different socials, Twitter, LinkedIn, or also to get access to and you know, maybe share with us some of your feedback and
feedbacks. Yeah, appreciate that. Based on that,
definitely.
we nurture every day, to make myself
Exactly.
better. Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the interesting things that I casually get, honestly, on socials is that some members finish a certification or finish a module, and they mention that it's good to always see that feedback on social because it means that you are putting the time and effort to
Effort.
continue learning after the session. And with the diverse mix actually that happens across the reactor topics, it gives you a good let's say holistic understanding of diverse topics, and sometimes you would like to go deeper in that topic, and then a certification is a proof that you went deeper in that topic and you became more hands-on experience, I would
Hands-on
say,
experience. Yeah.
with it. Yeah, definitely. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone,
Thank
for
you, everyone.
joining
Yeah.
us, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
See you. Bye. Thank you.